Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're here in Nairobi, Kenya. After a long journey from Cape Town, we made it all the way to the border of Ethiopia and unfortunately were turned away since the regulations have changed for importing vehicles. Anyhow, we're going to go over why we picked these bikes, what we liked about them, maybe what we would change. To begin with, they're very simple. They're air cooled. They have a carburetor. We can pretty much fix anything when we're out. Unfortunately, my bike did have an issue at the beginning from a previous repair. There was a little piece of metal trapped in an oil line, so that led to a couple of unreliable issues, but they were worked through in Cape Town. And now we've had no issues with these bikes all the way up. Sal's bike did have a slight issue with her carburetor being too rich. We sorted that out in Swakopmund, Namibia. And now hers actually gets way better fuel economy than mine. The 5 main reasons we brought these bikes are they're simple. They've been in continuous production since the early 80s. They still are made to today with an electric start version. They're dead reliable. We decided to take the same bikes so they share the same parts, so we only have to carry one set of spare parts. Parts are also available all over the world. They're extremely light, so even with bags on them, we can pick them up. It's a struggle for one, but if you have 2 people, you can definitely pick them up.
So as Ethan said, one of the best parts about these bikes is they're extremely light, but because of that, they're kickstart only. And I think a lot of people hesitate bringing these bikes on such a long trip because they are kickstart. Once you learn the starting procedure, it's really not a problem to start the bike. Before the trip, I had a hard time starting it. The bike was quite tall for me, so I put the lowering link in. I put the Kuba lowering link, and it dropped the bike about 2 inches. And once I did that, it helped a lot with kickstarting the bike because I could have better leverage. Before, unless I was on the pegs, I couldn't really follow through with the kick. If you're shorter or haven't kick-started a lot of bikes, it obviously is helpful to lower the bike. But with the starting procedure, it's super easy. It should not be the reason why you don't bring these bikes. I can't imagine having a different bike for this trip. I love it.
Okay, now I'm going to go over some of the things that we changed on these bikes to make them suitable for Africa. I'll start with these tanks. These are Cherbis tanks. They boost the range to almost double from the stock tanks. I believe the stock tanks are about 2.5 gallons. These are almost 6 gallons, I believe 5.8. They also flare out on the sides, which allows a little more cooling towards the engine. And then they also have dual petcocks on each side, so it allows the tanks to be emptied on both sides and have 2 reserves. With these tanks, we can get over 400 kilometers in range. And we also opted for the locking gas caps, which we really haven't needed because we usually camp near the bikes or they're in a secure parking area. But that is an option if you're concerned.
We switched our seats to the seat concept. We love them. We really have no complaints. It's a much wider seat than the stock seat. I feel like it would start to hurt after about an hour of riding. These we can go comfortably for like 2.5 hours, 3 hours before we really need to take a break. We added an IKEA sheepskin, which is very cheap and in our opinion a must. It gives it just a little more cushion. It raises it up a little more, maybe an inch, but the added comfort is a huge benefit. One thing to note is because these are wider, it was harder for me to get my feet on the ground once I switched the seat. But as I said, once I put the lowering link in, it really wasn't much of an issue.
Okay, now we're going to talk about tires.
For the front tires, Ethan has the Shinko SR244 and I have the Shinko E700s. So Ethan's is about a 50-50 dirt and on-road, and mine's a 60-40 on-road and dirt. Overall, they're both amazing tires. We loved them. For us, we would recommend my tire because we were generally doing more 60-40 on-road versus off-road. But both handled off-road very well. Mine is just a little bit quieter on-road, and the wear is better on my bike.
I would also recommend getting heavy-duty tubes put in. The thorns in Africa can really wreak havoc on your tires. We ended up replacing my tire in Vic Falls with Midas an E07, and it's been a fantastic tire. We did end up having to switch it to Sal's bike because when she bought a new tire in Zambia, the sidewall was just a little too high. The profile was too much. It's very round, and it was more road oriented, so it was harder for her to touch the ground. It contributed to a couple of crashes, and so now we swapped. That one's already worn out. The Duro is what I believe it's called. Yeah. It's already worn out.
It's quite bold.
And it's actually been on my bike less time than the Midas, whatever you want to call it. So the wear quality on that is much better. We would never buy this tire again. It already is bald.
I'm gonna briefly touch on carburetors because we talk about them in our other videos, which you can check out on the channel. Ethan has the stock Key carburetor, which is great. Usually starts first kick and hasn't really had any issues with it. Mine, on the other hand, I started this bike with a Mikuni TM38 non-pumper carb. It probably would have been fine, but the emulsion tube had worn out, so we sourced a used Mikuni TM40 pumper carb in Swakop Moon, Namibia. We put that in, finally got the right jetting, and it's been great since. The fuel economy on my bike is way better, and the throttle response with this carburetor is amazing.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about the Atlas throttle lock. A great addition to this motorbike. It eases wrist pain, but what you can do is give it a little throttle and you clip down on the top button and it locks the throttle into place. And as you go up and down hills, you can kind of adjust it and it'll stay in one position. And then to release it, you just hit this X and it works great. I might add a little piece of grip tape at some point as the pad wears down. It might just need a little help to stay in position. But yeah, it's a fantastic product. It takes a couple times to set it up, right? But once it's dialed, it's great.
So I had a different setup on my bike. It's much simpler. It's called a cramp buster. I really liked it. It just goes right on the end of the throttle and you can adjust it to wherever you like. And then basically you just kind of set your wrist on it. It's great for when you're on the highway or going straight and you're just holding on the throttle. I personally don't love it when we're off-road or we're in the city and I have to maneuver around tight things, just because I can't control the throttle quite as well. I just prefer without it if I'm having to be on and off the throttle all the time.
We started the trip without windshields and we decided that they're necessary. We took off our old face shields and got tinted ones. So we ended up putting those on just with zip ties and we noticed that it did help a little bit. Our friend Mario at Duneworks Yamaha in Swakopmund saw these primitive windshields that we made ourselves and he donated us 2 Super Tenere windshields. We just zip tied these on. The only recommendation that we would have is extend it out a little bit further in front of the headlight shroud, maybe more vertical, because it protects your body but it creates like a buffeting where your helmet is. So we're going to work on some different mounts when we come back.
Okay, I'm going to talk about my foot pegs. I have just generic eBay foot pegs. I think they were like $20. I really like these. I actually had these on my 650L, which got stolen right before the trip. They were on Ethan's bike before and I had IMS pegs on my bike, but we switched because these pegs just sit a little bit closer in, so it was they weren't in the way for me as much and I could get my feet on the ground better. The grip is fine and the platform's nice for holding your feet.
So I ended up with Sal's IMS foot pegs, which I really love, but she didn't have a problem with them because they are a little bit wider and they're really sharp. When you go to put your feet down, it's very easy to catch your pants or your boots, but since I'm a little taller, you can just reach around and it's been great. These are absolutely fantastic for off-road. Your feet stick to them like glue. Another thing we considered for this trip was our lighting. We went with Cyclops Adventure Sports front LED bulb, which is super high powerful. Their logo I think is See and Be Seen. They're also from our hometown, which is great. But yeah, it really lights up the night like it's day. We try to absolutely not ride at night in Africa because there's so many obstacles, but if we have to, Cyclops is definitely the way to go for lighting.
So on both of our bikes, we also have the Thumper Jockey light. Turn them on for a sec. They're extremely bright. We ordered these from Rocky Mountain ATV as well. And my headlight shroud wouldn't work with the Cyclops bulb, so I couldn't get one of those. So I just had a incandescent regular headlight, which has since burned out. So all I really could use at night was the Thumper Jockeys, and they were extremely bright. And I also like the fact that you can maneuver them. So if a lot of cars were coming, I could point them more down towards the ground and I wouldn't blind everybody. You can have one going in one direction and one in the other, and they light up the side of the road for animals and then the road right in front of you so you can see where you're going. I lucked out with my bike, and when I got it, it came with the CRF forks. They're amazing. I think it makes the riding much more plush. Ethan has the stock forks, which are also fine. He's a more experienced rider, and with the CRF forks, it balances our riding ability out. The comfort of these and the plushness, it makes me a lot more confident off-road and makes everything easier to ride.
So talking about exhaust, Sal's bike came with a XL600 front header there. It's a little bit wider than the stock one, I guess it gives it a little more high-end power for the highway. And then hers came with the traditional Super Trapper end cap muffler, and it's been fine. It's a little loud for our liking. We also had to put a couple extra heat shields so we didn't burn the bags, which has been kind of an annoyance. My bike has the stock header, and I put on an XR only exhaust, and it's kind of has like a expansion chamber under here. It's almost like a two-stroke pipe. It's much quieter. I do like it because it's extended more, so it doesn't get the fender black. It sounds great. Who knows if it gives it more power or not, but it looks cool. I still had to put this muffler packing around it so it didn't burn my bags, but I would highly recommend it.
So we definitely recommend doing your routine maintenance before you go on a long trip like this. Small things can turn into big problems, like my chain slider. It's been an ongoing issue. It broke in Namibia and just kind of caught up the front gear, but everything was fine. We've had to cut an old tire and put a strip on here, and we've continued to glue it and tape it and put zip ties on it, and we haven't been in a place long enough to order a new one. So we'll get a new one when we go home, but this could have been easily avoided if I had realized that mine was getting worn out and ordered a new one before the trip.
Another thing before you leave, make sure you put on new brake pads. It's just a lot easier to not have to change them on the road. They're not a big deal, but we wouldn't have had to bring a spare set if we just started out with new ones. I had to replace my front and my rear because they were half used before we left. While Sal's back on the other end had new brake pads, and hers are still going strong. Okay, quick note on our computers. I think when we go home, we're gonna source a couple of old school analog speedometer odometer combinations that just run with a cable to the front hub, because we don't want to deal with batteries. You can't see the display anyways, and we don't really want to deal with a big cumbersome computer that could have more issues and batteries and all that. So as you can probably tell by now, we're more analog than digital people. We like to keep it simple. We hope that we've provided useful information for anybody out there that really wants to tackle a trip like this. We highly recommend it, but there is, you know, things that hopefully
Just keep going.
we have some exciting news coming up about some riding.
We really hope that you guys found this information helpful if you're planning a big overland trip. Please leave any questions or comments below. We're happy to answer anything or explain things further for you. Stay tuned. We are going to do a gear review video in the next day or two, just about the motorcycle gear we have. We also are heading back to the States, which is exciting, and we have some cool motorcycle trips planned there, which we hope you guys enjoy. We're gonna leave the bikes here in Nairobi. We'll come back to these bikes and hopefully keep traveling north in a few months. Thanks for watching, and please remember to subscribe and hit the like button, and what else?
Do all that stuff that YouTube tells you.
Please remember to subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate the support.